And good afternoon. My name is Julie Rendelman. I'm going to be your host for the next couple hours. Anyone who knows me usually sees me sitting over there, but today I'm going to be sitting over here. And so we just cut out for a few minutes of the Leon Jacob case, where the defendant has taken the stand on his own behalf, and they've taken about a 5-minute break. And so we're going to talk for a little bit. We have a guest here via Skype. By the name of LaDawn Jones. She is, I believe she's an attorney. She is a politician. She's an author. I don't know if I'm going to be able to name everything she is, but I believe she lives in Atlanta, and welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Julie.
And I know that you are familiar with the Tex McIver case, obviously, because you live in Atlanta, and I think you used to work for that district attorney's office. Am I correct?
That's right. I was a chief senior prosecutor with that DA's office about 7 years ago.
Got it. So you must know some of the players, the judge that's involved in this case, and must have some insight about kind of what the community is feeling about this case. Because as I said to you before we went on, there are some people that have some feelings, not everybody, that there's some political motivation to pursuing murder charges against Tex McIver. And do you have any thoughts about that or any insight that you can give us?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of different factors going on in place. First, you have the elected district attorney, Paul Howard, who has been the DA for quite some time. And it's very important to him that he indicate that he is going to prosecute every case equally, no matter what your prominence may be in the city of Atlanta. And so he pushed forward this case, and over the time of pushing for the case, a lot of different things came out before it went to trial that gave an appearance of impropriety, an appearance of unfairness because of Tex McIver's connections in the legal community, his connections throughout the metro Atlanta area, the affluence of his deceased wife, and all those things made a big difference. So then you add into that some of the best known defense attorneys of Atlanta. You have Bruce Harvey, who is very well known for being very charismatic in court. It is not unusual for him to get a threat or order of contempt during a trial, making a sought after lawyer. And then Don Samuel, who I've had an opportunity to try a case with. You all may have heard of the prominent Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal. Mr. Samuel and I represented the client together, and he is very skilled, very intelligent, and all of them, the elected prosecutor, as well as Clint Rucker, who is the prosecutor assigned to the case and who's been trying the majority of this case, are all very well-known components. And so you have a lot of big egos in the room, a lot of legal brilliance that I think has skewed this trial and made it more interesting for viewers, but also made factors that we see throughout cases. For example, a defendant making phone calls from the jail is very normal. A prosecutor's office listening to those phone calls, particularly where they think there'll be witness tampering, is usual for the Fulton County DA's office. But all of these things were blown up that much bigger in this case, and it got a lot of attention and a lot of made-for-TV drama that I think has been building over the last several months that leading up to this case.
Do you have the impression, because he is a well-known attorney in the area, his wife was of great means, and it's not the biggest community, so he was known, and so I guess sometimes the question is did they pursue him almost because they felt he was getting too much good treatment initially? Like, it almost feels like they over-prosecuted because of their belief that he was almost being treated unfairly because of his knowing all the politicians in the area.
Well, so that would definitely be one point of view. And then what the district attorney has said publicly was, in most cases, the defendant his story does not change so many times. Right. During the bond hearings and some of the other pre-trial hearings, what we heard is that initially Mr. McIver said that he was asleep, and then at another time he said that they hit a bump in the road, and that's what caused the gun to automatically go off. And then another time, at a different statement, he says that they were afraid of being carjacked because there was a Black Lives Matter protest or rally going on.
Sure.
All at the time. And so the DA's office has said, because of these different explanations, something that may have been an accidental shooting appears very much intentional when you seem to can't get your story straight, right? If the gun just went off, which doesn't happen very often, by the way, a gun just going off, it may be possible but then why lie about it? And so that's what the DA's office has put forward, and that's what they have to prove at trial as well.
Right, and I get, I want to talk to you, if we can, for a few minutes, kind of about what you're saying in regards to all these stories he gave, and he did seem to give some inconsistent statements along the way as to what transpired in the back of the vehicle. And so my question to you is, and this is kind of something we've talked about, I've talked about it with Jesse Weber, I've talked about it with Aaron Keller, and the question I always ask, and I know Jesse, I think at least at some point felt the same way as me, is how do the changes in the story or the discussions with the only witness in the car about, not really getting involved rise to the level of an intentional murder versus the idea that this is a guy who knows the law, knows that he shouldn't have been sitting in a car with a loaded gun while he was, drinking or even getting tired in the back of that car. And how is it that anything that we've heard so far rises to the level of bringing this from an accident where there might be some criminal liability to an actual intentional murder?
Yeah, well, that is definitely a hurdle that the DA's office is going to have to get over, because so in the jury instructions, when at the end of the trial, when the jurors will get to hear what intent is and what evidence they can look at to determine if there's intent, right? The statements and actions of the accused after the shooting are all relevant factors for them to consider as a part of it. And so that is a factor, but is it enough, right? You can't determine what someone is thinking at the time, and that's always the problem with intent. If you're able to prove it by showing that someone pre-planned and did X, got the tools and planned the location, that's an easy way to do intent, as you see in the Jacob case, right?
Sure.
But here it's much harder, and all you have, which is not uncommon, is what was done after the fact. Now, the other thing that the DA's office attempted to use was his past actions. They attempted to bring in an activity where he shot at a vehicle of young men who it was about 20 years prior. And initially he said that the young men were trying to break into his house, and then he had said in another statement that he shot in the air, and then they were able to prove that he actually shot at the vehicle, and he subsequently paid for the call. So those are similar actions that can indicate intent. How he acted after that initial incident is that he lied about it, and then eventually he fessed up. And the same the DA's office is trying to show the same thing happened.
And I hear you, and I you're right. It's the prosecutor that bears this incredibly heavy burden, and they have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm still stuck with understanding how we get to the intentional murder based on what we heard. I do have a question, because I know one of the individuals that we're going to hear, I think we have a clip of, is, we're actually going to go live to McIver right now, so let's head on over in.
Yes, I of course didn't have the cremated remains of Mrs. McIver in the room while we were having our discussion. I keep those in a separate room only because some families are a little overcome with emotions if those are just sitting there while we're discussing things. So I went to receive Mrs. McIver, Mr. remains. I brought him in the conference room and placed him in the table in front of Mr. McIver. He opened the box, and at that time Javier was very overcome with emotion, and Mr. McIver also, he showed emotion as well. He was emotional as well, and I stood up, expressed to the gentleman that I would be outside for them to take their time, and I excused myself and closed the door so they could have time in the room.
And you said Javier was overcome with emotion. Can you describe to the jury what you mean by that in regards to Mr. Javier?
Javier was extremely upset. He was very emotional. He was crying, pretty strong.
And was that the same emotion that you saw from Mr. McIver?
Mr. McIver was emotional, but not quite to the extent of Javier.
And after they had an opportunity to view Ms. McIver's remains, what happened next?
The gentleman met me at the door. Mr. McIver shook my hand, expressed to me his gratitude, and that he would recommend my services to others. Of course, expressed gratitude in regards to that. And I told Mr. McIver that I would be in touch with him once I received the 10 small keepsakes, did the transfer, if you will, and that I would continue to look for a larger vessel or an ornament, if you will, to his suitability for the remaining remains of Mrs. McIver.
And do you recall, before leaving, how long Mr. McIver viewed Mr. McIver's remains?
No.
And good afternoon. Again, my name is Julie Rendelman. You're here on the Law&Crime Network, and I'm here talking to LaDawn Jones about the Tex McIver case that's going on right now. And LaDawn, if you heard, there was the funeral director that just testified, and I want to make sure I quote her correctly. She testified to some odd experience with Tex McIver after his wife had died, and she indicated that he had asked her if he could postpone paying for the cremation until an estate account was opened. And this was because he wanted to keep their money separate or not commingle the funds. And you're an attorney out of Atlanta, so I'm wondering if there is a non-nefarious reason why he might have done something like this.
So yes, there's a very important reason why he may have done this, and it could have been with both good or bad intent. But in Georgia, like in many states, you cannot benefit from the proceeds of someone who you have been found guilty of causing their demise. And so because of that, there was some pre-trial discussion about Tex McIver selling some of his wife's things, which he claims was to help pay for the expenses for the litigation. And the DA's office tried to stop him because those things he would not be able to sell them if he was found guilty.
Sure.
They would not have a chance to get the proceeds. So part of wanting to keep his estate separate is because how do they distinguish what money he can or cannot have at the end of this case, at the end of this trial? He can even be found guilty for involuntary manslaughter for the lesser included and get a very short sentence, right? That is something anywhere from 5 years or, probation. Other things are all possible or all the realm of possibilities. And he would need that money. So he may be doing it to make it clear what belonged to him and what was that of his deceased wife so that he was able to touch it without any problem. Or it very well may have been something completely separate and a way to try to get a hold of her money in some way. So we will never, much like we talked about in the previous segment, intent and the reasoning behind it is very hard to prove.
Sure, and I think you covered the area of what we were talking about before, which was the whole idea of the estate sale and how quickly it happened afterwards. And, many people say, if a loved one dies, some people wouldn't want to get rid of a single thing, while there's other people that sometimes when a loved one dies, they want to get rid of the things because sometimes the memories hurt them and sometimes because they need the funds. And I'm not sure if we've heard, again, everything kind of fits into either side, but these are just other, I assume, attempts of the prosecutor to indicate that the one thing he was after was her funds, and that's the motive for her death.
Right. And we have to keep in mind, I always say, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so to the prosecutors, no matter what Tex McIver does, they believe that he's a criminal. They believe that his intent was wrong. And so everything he does is going to be an indicator or a red flag of him trying to do something malicious, which is what makes Bruce Harvey and Don Samuel perfect attorneys to help represent them, because they know how to put on the flair and the flash that helps to quiet down some of the muddying the waters technique that Clint Rucker often uses, so that the jurors can look at it clearly for what it is and not what the hammer thinks the nail is doing.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of flash from both sides. I think they're equally, they're perfect competition for each other in regards to this case. I want to go to a clip now. I want to go to Jay Grover. I think he is one of the individuals that was involved in this estate sale, and let's see what he has to say.
Can you tell the jurors, while you were down on that level and you saw Mr. Hickey and Austin and the defendant on his phone, did the defendant say anything to you at that time? Did y'all have a conversation?
Yeah, we kind of we were tossing the football while he was on the phone, and then he apparently finished his call, and he and I kind of gravitated toward one another, and right there while Austin and Jim continued to throw the football, and Tex and I had a conversation.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, what did he say to you at that time?
He asked me if I knew anything about Social Security and Social Security checks.
And is that all he said to you?
Well, he asked the question, and I kind of made a joke, and I said, well, I know I'm not old enough to collect Social Security yet, and he said, well, I was just wondering about Diane's Social Security, and he went on to say, I was just wondering if I could collect her checks now. And I told him I didn't have any idea. I could find out, but I had no idea whether he could. In fact, I think I went on to say, I guess you can, but I don't know. And he said, well, he would find out himself. And then he made the statement that he was trying to get on the board of directors of a tobacco company in Oklahoma, and it paid $100,000 a year just to be on the board of directors. And if I can add, it was Liberty Tobacco Company was the actual name.
You remember the name of the tobacco company?
Yes, sir, I do.
And this conversation was on Tuesday, September 27th in the evening?
Yes, sir, it was.
Now,
Yes, sir.
okay, now having had the opportunity to review your notes, is your memory refreshed about when you would have had this conversation?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell the jury when?
Again, I don't know the exact date, but it was on the Friday of that same week.
Okay. And can you tell the jury the phone conversation, it was actually with the defendant?
Yes, sir, it was.
Can you tell the jury, what did he say?
We had a conversation about a friend of mine purchasing the SUV, the Expedition, the Ford Expedition.
The one that was involved in this incident?
Yes, sir.
And during that conversation, did you learn whether or not the defendant actually had regained custody of the SUV at that time from the police?
Yes, sir.
What did he tell you?
That he had that SUV and that it was hidden at James Hughes' house.
Who was James Hugh?
James Hugh is a friend and many of the people. I mean, myself, Mr. Corey, Tex, Diane. He's a handyman. He works for us. Works for the Corey company's part-time. He cleans our offices, but he does detail work on cars.
Okay.
He's a jack of all trades.
Okay. And did the defendant tell you why he had the car hidden down at James Hughes' house?
To keep the press from getting pictures of it.
preparing the vehicle to be sold?
Yes, he said that he was going to have James detail the vehicle, clean it up, and get it showroom new.
And by cleaning up the vehicle and detailing it and getting it showroom new, did you understand from the defendant that would occur on the outside of the vehicle as well as the inside of the vehicle?
Well, showroom new to me would be inside and outside.
Objection. If he could just limit his answer to what Mr. McIver said.
Okay.
Please.
Fair enough. So you were responding to the question. The question took you somewhere where we didn't need to go. Your sense of what it meant, just whatever Mr. McIver told you, is what we go by.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I want to stay in the same conversation that you were having with the defendant on Friday, okay? Okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, can you tell the jury, is there a reason why Friday of that first week and this conversation sticks out for you?
There is.
And can you tell the jury what?
Well, at this point in time, then when Tex would call me, then I would put my phone on speaker so others could hear the conversation, and that's what I did on this call. And I put it. I was in my office, and he called me on my cell phone. I put it on the speakerphone, and I walked down while talking to him to Mr. Corey's office, and Mr. Corey and Ken Rickert, our general counsel, and Angie Brooks, all they were in his office already, engaged in a conversation, and I went in and I kind of.
That's all what you did. What'd you do with your hand?
I made the motion for them to be quiet, and I pointed at my phone, and Tex was talking, and I laid the phone down.
And good afternoon. I'm here at Law&Crime. My name is Julie Rendelman. I'm here with LaDawn Jones, and we're back. We're waiting for the Tex McIver case to start, and let's listen in on what's going on.
Your specifications, we only need an idea of what you would like. Please call me with any questions, right?
Yes.
This is dated November 1st,
Yes.
correct? So you write to him and say the 10 urns are available, right?
Yes.
I'm going to jump on my shoelaces here. But the big one's not ready yet, because he hasn't agreed on one that he likes yet, correct?
Is that a yes or no, or can I elaborate?
I don't care.
I hadn't found one, and he hadn't found one either.
And then about a week later, he comes and picks up the 10 small urns.
On the 8th day of November, yes.
Okay, so I don't know what day your letter is received, but it's dated November 1st, assuming it's received on the 2nd or 3rd or something, and we don't know.
Yes.
So 5 days later, he comes and picks up the cremains, correct?
Yes.
Have you placed the ashes in the 10 small urns, or do they come in a box and he...
No, I do that.
You do that?
I do that, yes.
So, this may be rhetorical, but if he was waiting to have the ashes put into the urns by you, he had to wait until he knew that the 10 urns were there, correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you're saying. One more time.
If he wanted the 10 urns to be filled by you,
Right?
okay, he had to wait until the 10 urns arrived at your funeral home, correct?
Yes.
And he had to wait until he knew the 10 urns arrived at the funeral home, correct?
Yes.
And when he comes on the 8th, you in fact have filled the 10 urns with some portion of the cremains, correct?
Yes, but I need to elaborate on something with you, if I may. No? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
It's
Go ahead.
not an answer to my question.
It is an answer to your question.
All right,
At some point, and it's, believe it or not, it's not in my documentation, Mr. McIver inquired as to Mr. Grover coming to pick up the small 10 urns.
okay.
So this was way before the 8th day of November.
Right.
So go ahead.
That really wasn't an answer to any question I asked.
Okay, well, go ahead. I just need to put that in
In fact,
there.
you wrote to him and said only you can come pick him up without express authorization.
That's right, without permission.
He either, whenever that conversation occurred, he doesn't have Mr. Grover come, he comes.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And picks up the 10 urns that have,
Remains in them.
and the box that contains the remainder, because you never did come to terms with him about the larger one. He never liked yours, you never liked it. You couldn't come to an agreement.
We couldn't find a vessel, yes.
And he left them with the 10 urns and the box.
Yes.
With the balance. Okay.
And good afternoon. We're here at Law&Crime listening in on the Tex McIver case. And while we're doing that, we also are waiting for a verdict in the Leon Jacob case. I'm here with LaDawn Jones, and it looks like they've taken a little break from the funeral director. The funeral director has made a couple statements that seem to support, perhaps, if you're on the prosecution side, the argument that Mr. McIver was interested in his wife's money, and that was the motivation for why he intended to kill her. But there was just some cross-examination. I'm curious, LaDawn, what your thoughts are on how that went with this witness. I don't know if you were able to hear it from where you were.
So it was interesting, and you find this quite often when you have a neutral witness who is someone who does not know any of the parties. They're just telling their side of the story. And as a juror, you hear the defense, the prosecution asking questions about how Tex McIver came in and asked for information about Social Security. And I mean, as you hear it build up, it's like, wow, my goodness, why would he ask these kind of questions? His wife just died. That sounds horrible. And then, as a very able defense attorney that Mr. Garland is, he gets up and he begins to make it clear, well, this is actually standard. And this is what happens in many cases. And not only is this standard, but it is a federal law and state law that it's her job to give out this information, right? And so it's not unusual that someone like Mr. McIver who would know that this is the person you ask these kind of questions, and so it wasn't out of place and it didn't show malicious intent. And so you always see in these kind of cases the jury.
And I'm just going to interrupt, and I apologize for interrupting you. We're just heading back. I think we have some jury questions.
A face-to-face meeting with Mr. McIver and had a discussion about could payment be deferred. Did you let him know that despite the deferral, he could take the remains with him that day?
Yes. Yes, I did.
Did you play any role in planning or preparing for a funeral or memorial service or celebration of life for Ms. McIver?
No.
Did you notify Mr. McIver when the bill was paid? I know you kept it anonymous, but did you nonetheless let him know there remains no outstanding balance?
No.
Any reason why you didn't let him know that it had been paid?
It all happened in such a short amount of time. Some of it happened over the weekend, then I received his letter. There were other families that I was serving, so they all kind of came together. They issued the letter.
Okay.
Kind of came together in what?
There were a lot of things going on, other families and funerals, so it all kind of came together.
Any follow-up, Mr. Abate? No. Mr. Samuel? All right, that's it. Thank you for your time. Here you go. Have a good weekend.
When you come back to pick up the remains about a week or so after this October 1st date, do you at some point have a conversation, or do you learn that Ms. McIver's remains are still at Phoenix?
Yes.
And do you, as a result of this information, do something?
Not immediately, no.
Till
I
the
just
jury
asked
what
if
did
she
you
was
ask?
still there. If she was still there. And she was.
Tell the jury a little bit about, you said not immediately, what happens over the next week or so as you are trying to deal with your own loss.
I know that my sister, we had questions with certain things with paperwork, you know, legal stuff for ourselves. And so we always asked. She would ask, and I would ask.
Let's stay focused on when she next got involved with anything to do with Ms. McIver's remains.
Sure. At some point after having to reach out for your own estate out to Phoenix, does your sister, do you and your sister decide to make a payment as a result of the remains still being there at Phoenix?
Yes.
And when does that happen?
October 22nd.
And how does that happen?
My sister called in, learned that her remains were still there, and we anonymously paid for
That
her.
decision to make that payment, is that something that the two of you make together?
Yes.
And why did you choose to be anonymous?
It was a gift. It was private. No one needed to know. It was not to be known. In fact, I was angry that anybody learned that we paid. I didn't want anybody to know. I just wanted her out of there.
At any point after you made this anonymous payment, or this attempt to be anonymous payment, did you have a conversation with Mr. McIver?
No.
At any point immediately before making this payment or making that decision, did you have a conversation with Mr. McIver?
No.
And as you sit here today, have you or your sister ever been paid back for what you paid for her remains?
Objection to relevance, Your Honor.
Well, if it was anonymous, how sustained? You also disregard, I don't know if you managed to answer, you may have moved your head, but it took me a minute to think through your concern.
Just one moment.
Okay. You all disregard that question insofar as you processed an answer or felt you received one from Mr. Hanson about getting reimbursed for the expenditure. It's not relevant.
Your Honor, can I approach just briefly?
It's about this.
It's about a foundational question I would need to ask.
Okay.
And we're here listening in on the Tex McIver case. We have some issues, some technical difficulties, and I'm here with LaDawn Jones. I apologize. And I just wanted to ask you, it seems that this witness is basically testifying, and we were just talking about this, that her father had passed away shortly after Tex McIver's wife, and that she had picked up the remains very quickly, and that she found out that her remains were still there, and then therefore she made an anonymous donation to pick them up. Where does this get the prosecution in terms of proving that Tex McIver intentionally killed his wife?
So, I would guess that there's one or two things happening right now. So either this is a part of the muddy the waters kind of tactic in order to make it not clear anything that may be negative in the prosecution's case. The other thing may be avoid surprise, right? And so they know that with this witness that they're going to show that a lot of the things that were shown or that the prosecution believes they showed through the person who took care of the body and the previous witness that was on the stand, that it should not be undermined. They're going to pull up those same questions, right? So to take away the element of surprise for the defense, so the defense can't now use this to say, see that previous witness, throw out all their entire testimony. So one or two things that happen, I believe, is either strategic or they're fishing really hard.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think about, when someone passes away, and whether it be a loved one, a parent, a child, or a husband or wife, the first thing you do is you go and you find out kind of the details, whether it be Social Security information. These are all things that the funeral director is an expert in, and they're going to give you that information because you need that information in order to fill out certain paperwork to get it done right away. And so I almost feel like there is a desperation here in trying to almost compare the way this woman acted with the way Tex McIver acted. And it seems to me that we keep going back to this theme of the prosecution wanting to prove he's guilty because he either doesn't cry enough, he's not emotional enough, he doesn't act the exact way someone else did who may tear up more when a loved one dies, and that now he's left the ashes there, and therefore that means he didn't love her, and therefore he intentionally killed her. And I guess I feel like it's a reach. I'm curious. I'm curious if you feel that way, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle.
Well, it does seem like a reach without knowing more. Here's one clue, though. As you know, juries as well as viewers at home aren't privy to a lot of the pretrial motions, a lot of the conversations that happened at the bench. So I noticed two things in her testimony. First, there came a point where someone elicited some hearsay and she caught herself. Right. And she knew that she was not supposed to answer that question. What that tells me for a normal lay witness, that they were told, do not go into this area at some pretrial motion. The other thing that I noticed is that they're going on and on about something that I think it's really not relevant. So either defense is being really lax and they're just allowing them to go on and on because they know it's not relevant, right, or this was discussed in a pretrial motion that this will be allowed, which means there has to be some kind of connection to the other evidence in the case or some other kind of proof. So, without seeing the end of the trial and all of the witnesses presented, I have a feeling that there's some connection here. But watching that segment in and of itself, it does seem quite remote and irrelevant.
And we shall see if that connection actually exists. We're going to head back into the courtroom.
Yes, that was something that you had a part in.
Yes.
You didn't just attend it.
Correct.
You helped her find her dress.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
She had her dress designed and made.
Okay. So. I thought I heard you say you helped her with her dress. So what did you mean?
I helped her get dressed.
Get dressed.
She changing clothes, as women change their clothes quite a bit for rehearsal dinners or once or twice during the wedding day in the evenings. So.
Okay. Was there like a bridal party? Were you part of that or not?
I was around, yes.
Okay. And you got to know Mr. McIver as well, right?
Yes.
Next. And you have been to the ranch, right?
Many times.
Many times. And let me work a little bit kind of backwards from where we were with where we ended your direct testimony and talking about paying for Diane's remains. And you told us that you paid for your sister.
Correct.
Paid for the cremains on October
22nd.
22nd. Okay. And you told us that you had not had any conversations with Mr. McIver around the time that you paid for Diane's cremains.
Regarding the remains?
Yes. So here's what I'm trying to find out. Did he tell you about any conversations he was having with Wendy Edson at Phoenix?
No.
Okay. And you didn't tell him you made the payment for Diane's cremains, right?
No.
You didn't tell him you were intending to make that payment? Okay. And even after you made the payment, you didn't tell him you made that payment, right? Right?
Right. Correct.
I know
yes.
We are
correct.
having a conversation and you are anticipating my question, but if you let me finish for the court reporter and then you can answer. It's just so she can take it down.
Of course.
All right. So, you don't know what arrangements Mr. McIver was making to have small sort of sentimental urns.
And we are going to be wrapping up our show for the day. You can continue to watch the Tex McIver case on Law&Crime Network website. We are signing off, and we will see you on Monday. Thank you.